Saludamos a Mona Shtaya. Ella es defensora de los derechos digitales palestinos. Trabaja como asesora en un centro árabe que promueve el uso de herramientas digitales a la sociedad civil palestina y árabe. Se centra en la vigilancia, la privacidad y los derechos digitales en la región de Medio Oriente y África del Norte. Ella nos va a ayudar a entender el tema de la desinformación sobre la guerra. La desinformación, un arma más en este terrible conflicto. La primera pregunta, Ana, para doña Mona Shtaya, es sobre algo que es muy recurrente desde la mirada de Israel. Es que nos repiten todos los días que los bebés, que los niños fueron decapitados. ¿Esa información es verdadera? ¿Está confirmada? ¿O eso es producto de la desinformación en las redes sociales?
Good morning, Mrs. Shtaya. Thank you very much for your time today at W Radio. And let's begin speaking, of course, of false news, fake news. Very recurrent, we're hearing from Israel speaking about the babies that were decapitated. In your organization, what you guys have analyzed, is it true? Were babies decapitated? Is this information confirmed, or is it part of fake news?
Thank you so much for your question and for having me today. As you may know, like part of the escalations on the ground are, whenever the escalations on the ground are escalating, we are witnessing more disinformation in the social media platforms. And this disinformation has been shared by politicians in their media interviews and in their speeches, as well as on their Facebook and social media pages. Part of this disinformation and misleading news is the beheaded babies, which they started this whole discourse about. And whenever we were looking into the fact-checking organizations, we found that the Anadolu, which is a media outlet, they have fact-checked that, and they even contacted the Israeli forces, who said that they don't have any evidence to prove that they have 40 beheaded babies, which means that this is a disinformation that was spread all over. And I want to say that this is not like the only case of having disinformation during those escalations. There has been so many other pictures that have been fabricated by AI or AI-generated pictures spread by Israeli politicians on their social media platforms, as well as other misleading news about different aspects of those escalations, that when people are double check that, those are misleading news.
Pues dice que sabe que a medida de que avanza esta escalada en el terreno, están viendo más desinformación en las redes sociales, y es información que comparten también los políticos tanto en entrevistas como en sus propias redes sociales, y parte de esa desinformación fue esa publicación de los bebés decapitados. Nos dice que incluso pudieron contactar con Voces Israelíes, uno de los medios de comunicación que publicó esta información, y aseguró que no tienen evidencia para probar que habían bebés decapitados. Eso es una de las desinformaciones que se divulgó en medio de esta nueva ofensiva, pero nos dice que no es el único caso. Hay otras fotos alteradas por inteligencia artificial que han sido divulgadas por las autoridades israelíes y que hacen parte de toda esta campaña de desinformación.
La guerra, por supuesto, tiene como factor nuevo la llegada de la inteligencia artificial. ¿Cómo esto, la inteligencia artificial, ha afectado la narrativa y los discursos de esta guerra?
The war has a new thing, and it's artificial intelligence. How do you believe that artificial intelligence has affected the narrative of the information being shared about the war?
So there is a case where we have observed the Israeli Prime Minister shared a post on his social media platform using a very a picture that is basically really reflecting a very bad situation for a burn child. And fact checkers were checking that picture, and they found that this was an AI-generated picture. And the original picture, basically, it does have a dog, a live dog out there. So whenever we're talking about AI-generated pictures, they are now part of the disinformation that have been used and weaponized in the escalations that are ongoing in Gaza Strip. And I believe it's also used not only in Palestine, but also in other parts of the world, because we've seen other cases in different conflict areas where they have been used to represent something, but it doesn't really, it's not really a real pictures of what's happening on the ground. So in the Palestinian case, we got this example, and it doesn't last for so long, because people basically, our fact checkers, they discovered that later in few hours. However, the impact of that is going far beyond, and because social media platforms didn't take that picture down and it stayed online, this means that they are contributing to stereotyping, labeling, and dehumanizing Palestinians, as well as to spread more disinformation about what's happening in this conflict. So people also around the world would have a different narrative, or won't have the right narrative.
Let me translate that really quickly, please. Nos dice que pues sí han observado varios casos. Por ejemplo, hay uno en el caso del primer ministro israelí que en sus redes sociales usó la foto de un bebé muerto que estaba quemado, y se dieron cuenta que fue modificada por inteligencia artificial porque la foto original era un perro. Entonces, en cuanto a las fotos y a la inteligencia artificial, sí está haciendo parte de esa desinformación que se está usando a medida de que escala el conflicto y la guerra en la Franja de Gaza, y nos dice que no es solo algo que se está usando en contra de los palestinos, sino también otras partes del mundo. Ese caso palestino es solo un ejemplo, a pesar de que la gente eventualmente se da cuenta que es inteligencia artificial y se revela la verdad, pues sí lleva o tiene un impacto que va más allá, porque pues en las redes sociales no quitan esas fotos y contribuye a la desinformación y a la deshumanización de los palestinos y la construcción de cierta narrativa.
¿Qué explicación encuentra ella en que Meta, la empresa de Facebook, hable de resistencia para describir la lucha de los ucranianos y prohíba publicaciones de palestinos con la misma palabra?
What is your opinion about Meta when it comes to resistance in the Ukrainian war, but then with the Palestinians they allow the use of the word?
So there is really a double standard whenever it comes to Meta and other social media platforms and their response to what's happening in Palestine right now. When the Ukrainian-Russian case started, they basically took very strict measures to protect Ukrainians from hate speech, incitement, violent speech, and disinformation on their platforms. They increased their measures, and they really took protective measures for Ukrainians. However, in the Palestinian case, incitement, hate speech, and violent speech is spread on their network without taking any measurements to protect Palestinians on their platforms. And on the other hand, they are also censoring Palestinian narratives. So whenever we are publishing documentation of human rights violations, they are censoring that. Sometimes they are taking that down from their platform, and some other times we have shadow banning, which is reducing the viewership and reachability of our stories. And with the unfair coverage from the international mainstream media of what's happening in Gaza Strip, they are contributing to censoring Palestinian voices and silencing us.
Pues nos dice que las redes sociales como Meta tienen dobles estándares y ha respondido de una manera diferente en lo que está pasando en Palestina, lo que pasó en Ucrania. Por ejemplo, nos dice que en este momento sí se protegió a los ucranianos del discurso de odio que podía desarrollarse a raíz de que se desató esa guerra, pero con los palestinos no ha pasado así. No se ha protegido a los palestinos de ese discurso de odio que se desata en las redes sociales y ese ataque que se ve ahí. No han hecho nada para protegerlos, pero también nos dice que incluso cuando ellos publican documentación que verifica cierta historia del lado palestino, las plataformas la quitan. Entonces también nos dice que eso está contribuyendo a que se dé cierta narrativa y pues a que se silencien las voces palestinas.
Yo quisiera preguntarle, los videos con fake news siguen llegando a diario contra Palestina y contra Israel. ¿Cómo identificamos o reconocemos que estamos frente a una información falsa. ¿Qué consejos nos puede dar?
We want to get an advice from you because, of course, the fake news videos are coming from both ways, Israelis or Palestinians. How can we recognize that what we're seeing is fake news?
Basically, people should be double-checking pictures before believing or sharing those pictures, because sometimes people, especially those who are agnostic politically, who don't have a certain affiliation either to Palestinians or to Israelis, would just be seeing that and just believe what they are seeing. However, with a lot of this information spread on the social media platforms, people should be double-checking that. Also, people should be following pages on social media platforms that are well known for their credibility and do not share, and those who didn't share previously disinformation and misinformation about what's happening. For example, the Israeli politicians, they are spreading disinformation all the time. So people should be doubting about the facts, the credibility of those news. And before you believe those news, you should be fact-checking that. And even whenever it comes to the Palestinian news, you can also fact-check that, and you can visit certain pages on the social media platforms that are well known for their credibility. One of them is IMEU, and there is Rabit CIPD, among others. There is Mondowise, and there are a lot of other media outlets that are basically covering what's happening in Palestine. One of them also is Ion Palestine. So people can see those trusted accounts because they are reporting usually what's happening on the ground when they have high credibility, not only in Palestine, but also globally.
Pues nos dice que las personas deben chequear doble antes de creer en una foto publicada. Normalmente cuando se ve una fotografía simplemente las personas lo creen sin chequear y pues no siguen cuentas verificadas o conocidas por su credibilidad, así que la recomendación es esa, no creer en publicaciones, en medios o en personas que han desinformado en el pasado. Por ejemplo, nos dice que hay políticos israelíes que publican desinformación todo el tiempo, entonces dudar de esos individuos, de esas noticias, chequearlas para saber si en realidad son ciertas, y nos dice que hay páginas conocidas que están informando desde el terreno en la Franja de Gaza que reportan lo que está pasando ahí. Nos da el ejemplo de I Am Palestine y son páginas conocidas por su credibilidad, así que ese es el consejo que nos da. Pero hablando de desinformación, Ana, yo quisiera preguntarle por el lado de Hamás. El presidente de los Estados Unidos nos ha dicho que no debemos ni siquiera creer en las cifras de muertos que se publica del lado de Hamás y del Ministerio de Salud que controla Hamás. ¿Qué nos dice de eso? ¿Esa información sí es creíble o no es creíble tampoco?
Speaking specifically about Hamas and the information we're getting from the health ministry in Gaza, some governments have said that we cannot even trust those figures. What do you feel about these figures that are coming from the authorities in Gaza that are, of course, linked to Hamas?
So, as for what's happening in Gaza, we usually follow certain resources. We can follow the Ministry of Health because they are giving numbers about the reported cases of injured and killed people in Gaza Strip. There are also other resources. There are some influencers who are on the ground and who are well known for reporting with high credibility. For example, one of them, he's called Mu'taz Azaizer, and he's usually reporting from what's happening on the ground. He has over 11 million followers on Instagram, and people are following him because he is honest and he is credible about what's happening on the ground. As for also other kind of information or other sources of information, many of the humanitarian organizations, they are reporting numbers about children like Save the Children, UNICEF, and UNRWA, among others. And there are also Palestinian organizations such as the Palestinian Red Crescent, among other organizations, and Al-Mizan for human rights. Those are also reporting what's happening on the ground. So usually we should think about following the human rights organizations who are in the field, and there is also Amnesty International there and different other human rights organizations who are reporting what's happening on the ground. So if we follow them, we can understand the situation and we can see the numbers. We don't have to follow the politicians to understand what's happening. Like, they are not giving us the facts about what's happening. They shouldn't have, like, doing that. But, like, yeah, we can follow the humanitarian organizations and the human rights organizations.
Pues nos dice que para poder corroborar esa información que divulga el Ministerio de Salud se pueden seguir organizaciones de derechos humanos que están en el terreno para entender la situación. Nos dice que no necesariamente se tienen que seguir a los políticos, sino que también hay muchas organizaciones palestinas que están ahí reportando desde el terreno, y también organizaciones humanitarias como UNICEF, por ejemplo, la Cruz Roja, que tienen la información y pueden darnos pues ese listado de las personas que se han reportado como muertas y heridas y que también ha publicado el Ministerio de Salud.
Pregunto desde Beijing, China. ¿Ha identificado usted potencias extranjeras como tal, estados, tras estas acciones de desinformación sobre el conflicto palestino-israelí con fines geopolíticos?
Have you guys identified if some of this fake news in reference to what's happening in Palestine with Palestinians has had some sort of international interference, perhaps from governments or from countries outside of the region that could be interfering or could be promoting this fake news about what's happening with Palestinians?
Yeah, actually, because you started the conversation about the beheaded babies, this piece of the news was basically shared by the U.S. president at the beginning of the escalations on the ground. He shared that, and he spoke about that. So other political leaders also contributed to spreading this information, and then his team were apologizing because there is no evidence for this happening. So yeah, we are talking about also other interference from politicians who are supporting Israel and were sharing or amplifying the same disinformation that they started here in the social media and in the media.
Well, Mona, thank you so much for your time in W Radio. It's been a pleasure having you today in our show.
So much.
Thank you, bye bye. Pues nos dice que de hecho, como comenzamos esta conversación preguntándole por los bebés decapitados, nos puede dar ese ejemplo, y porque esa información fue compartida de hecho inicialmente por el presidente de los Estados Unidos. Dijo que había visto fotos, después tuvo que pedir perdón porque no era cierto. Entonces esa es una evidencia de cómo los políticos están contribuyendo a esa narrativa falsa que llega desde Israel, y nos dice que hay mucha interferencia de políticos que apoyan a Israel, que están amplificando desinformación por parte de ellos.